Today is Thursday, March 9th, 2017. We are in the top of Town Hall in Sudbury, Massachusetts with Lee Swanson. So can you tell us a little about yourself, your name, your age, where you're born, and where you currently live?
I was born in Cambridge, Mass. in 1938, and I live in Sudbury at Mesquiticut Village.
And how did you come to live in Sudbury?
I've lived in Sudbury off and on. I never was able to afford a house, but rented and leased since 1984.
Mm-hmm. So would you say you spent pretty much your entire life in and around? We had the Wayside Country Store in Marlborough, and most of our customers were from Sudbury, and at first, and our address was Sudbury, except we weren't in Sudbury, it was Marlborough, but Henry Ford didn't recognize Marlborough, so he called it South Sudbury, and it just became a way of thinking that everything was related to Sudbury. Mm-hmm. Do you have any family that still lives in town, or?
Presently, all my family is passed on, except my two sisters who live in North Carolina and California.
All right, so they got away from the snow. So what is your occupation? So what did you do here? What do you do here?
I was the owner of a business in Marlborough called Wayside Industries, and then I bought another business called Wright Stove Polish Company. And then I bought a factory, 43,000 square feet in Marlborough, and lived in Marlborough for a number of years, running those businesses, and then I was able to have a home here in Sudbury, and it was a very unique home. It was Abe Cutting's homestead that he had designed, he and his wife, on the edge of Maynard-Sudbury line, and it was with extensive gardens and swimming pool and a pond and geese and ducks and all sorts of birds, and I was there for 2.5 years.
Do you have any particularly fond memories from that house?
Well, I decided to have a party one day, and I was running a B&B, bed and breakfast, and I had house guests, and I invited them to the party. It was July 4th, and it was a very unusual party. I had a band down in the lower garden next to the pond, and rock and roll band, and people would be strolling up and down the paths and of the gardens, and the couple who got involved with everyone and was talking with everyone, the elderly couple that were house guests. And then a friend decided that he'd take his surfboard out onto the water, but he was just paddling it, and so he's out in the water, and the surfboard was rainbow colored, and then he was out in the middle of the pond, and we heard a whooshing sound to the left, and two hot air balloons with 4 or 5 people in each came whooshing down across the pond, and then off to the right, and everyone has thought, gee, I must have had talked them into coming to the party?" And I said, "No." And then 2 geese flew down, Canadian geese, and started to go in tune with the music. And everyone thought I had brought in trained geese. No, it just happened to be that way. It was just an exceptional day.
I'm surprised the geese didn't attack anyone. I've never had a good experience with Canadian geese.
Oh, we had our first geese at Hager Pond behind the country store in 1947. Two Canadian geese came up from the pond and were looking for food, and we fed them. So they were able to feed out of our hand, and that was very unusual in 1947. And my father saw that they both had bands on their feet. So he easily caught them, looked at the band, it had a telephone number. So he called the telephone number, and a man answered, and my father said, "We have 2 Canadian geese with your telephone number on it." And he said, "Really?" And my father said, "What do you want to do with them?" "You can keep them." Well, who am I speaking to? "Leverett Saltonstall. Goodbye." And that turned out to be Leverett Saltonstall's pair of geese that were kept on his estate to draw Canadian geese down from the skies as they're flying by. But then it became illegal to do that, so he had released them. And that started now there's hundreds of Canadian geese in that area, thanks to Leverett Saltonstall, governor.
Did you keep those Canadian geese around as like unofficial pets?
They were there. They would come and go. Just be part of the atmosphere.
Yeah. I had a friend get viciously attacked by a goose while she was walking past it. Went after her backpack. It was a bit of a nightmare. So were you and have you been actively involved in town politics?
After spinal surgery in 1993, I decided I'd get involved in politics. I was living in Sudbury, so I ran for selectman. And I discovered I had 217 friends that voted for me. and that was it. But otherwise, I've served on the Historic District Commission, and busy that way.
For people who might not know the difference between the Historical Society and like the Historical Districts Commission, would you mind explaining how the Historical District Commission differs from the Society?
Well, we have 3 historic entities in town, you might say. One is the Historic Commission, which is started in 1968 and is part of the town, is a town board, and is in charge of town property that is historic, like the Haynes Garrison or the Hosmer House. And then we have the Historic District Commission, which was started a little bit later, that is in charge just of historic districts, which we have 5 in town that the population is allowed to happen. It benefits the homeowners. Their houses are worth more, but some people think it doesn't, so they don't want to be in the historic district. And then the Historical Society is a nonprofit entity that we started in 1956, and it just collects the history of Sudbury.
What's your fondest memory of either growing up or right now from Sudbury?
Fondest memory would be my time at the Abe Cudding's house. Mm-hmm. That was a remarkable house. It was it was their version of a New England house that just kept growing. It had two legs to it from the kitchen over. It just went on forever. It had 14 rooms and one of the interesting things is that none of the bedrooms had doors on them except the daughters. So I had to put doors in all the bedrooms when I moved there.
It's an interesting thing to be missing from a house, is the doors. But seeing as you've been involved and just around Sudbury for the majority of your life, what have been some of the major changes you've seen happen here?
The tremendous growth. When we moved here in 1947, my parents bought a empty general store and reopened it as the Wayside Country Store. It was a agricultural town, carnation growing, other flowers specialists that were grown, flowers that were grown here, but everyone knew everyone else, and that was the unique aspect that my parents weren't used to that, coming from Melrose and Malden, where we had a store, a grocery store. So it was a very, very different atmosphere here for my parents. And I luckily had the Wayside Inn to play in as growing up. It was just a mile away, and I knew every nook and cranny of it. That was before the 1955 fire that destroyed so much of destroyed 90% of the fabric of the inn. But that whole area, the grist mill, the schoolhouse, the chapel, and all the other hidden things of the Wayside Inn estate, I knew better than anyone else.
Yeah. Would you mind sharing some of those secrets, or do you want to keep those to yourself for now?
Well, there was in the Washington dining room, which has been renamed the Lemon Dining Room at the inn, there was a secret door that you pushed and pulled it just a certain way, I discovered, and it exposed a stairway that led all the way up to the attic, which was at that time not a big wide open area as it is today, but was 5 different guest rooms. And
so, I guess given Jerusha Howe, kind of a local ghost story, so the time you spent there as a kid, did you, I guess, have an experience or kind of see anything that was or could be considered a ghostly apparition or an experience?
I never did, and that was unusual because I have discovered as a child that I was very sensitive to otherworldly guests, and had experienced them in many times in antique houses. But the inn, they were very friendly. There was nothing. So I was never bothered by them. They're just there, part of the fabric.
That's interesting.
Could you just talk a little about maybe the work that you've done with the Historical Society or being town historian?
Well, I've been with the Historical Society since I don't know when I joined, 89 maybe, 86. But always supporting them while being at the inn from 1984 on to 2001, I was archivist and curator. So I was always promoting this historical society before I ever joined it. But with the historical society, it was a matter of they had 13 people come to a meeting. 13 people. That was a big meeting. And I said, this is insane. There's got to be more that we can be doing. So I just pushed and prodded and made it what I think of as a living entity, that it is alive and well and growing. And when I took over as the president, I was elected president in 1996. I hired a friend who was a benefactor of the society to have a cannon out in front of the chapel for the meeting that he charged and blew the cannon, and then he gave a talk on his Civil War weapons that he collected, and that was Pete Elby. So that was just my warning to the members that it was going to be a lot of noise that we were going to be making if I was involved. So it became I was president for, I guess, 2 years and perhaps more, but it just grew. Whereas being the town historian, because Kurt Garfield has been in a nursing home or before that at home, just not able to do anything and couldn't figure out how to work a computer, I wrote the annual town reports for the town historian for 4 years before I became town historian, because he was simply not able to do it. The town historian role is not anything of significance right now. It needs to be looked at to see how that can grow.
I know I love history, and I learned some interesting things about Sudbury when I started interning here. But are there any traditions that Sudbury used to do or that we still do that you find you prefer more than others, or do you have a favorite town tradition?
The town tradition that was now lost since 1968 is our set of stocks that we had out here in the common, that we had given, meaning the Sudbury Historical Society, had given to the town, to the selectmen in 1957. That was a big attention. It was a big deal to have that in the center of town, and it became something that you had to visit and sit in and put your neck into, and it was just I thought, a wonderful, interesting historic item that used to be in this town by decree, and then a school bus hit it. It was never put back.
Do you think we should bring back those stocks?
Yes.
Well, that would be fun. Take your parents down on a Saturday, visit the stocks.
Yeah, just if you have anything else you want to share, it's up to you.
Well, just sitting here looking at the innards of the U.S. Post Office that used to be in a very small building next to what is now, as part of what is now Heritage Park, with a school mom, with a postmistress in there, who would be selling penny candy along with stamps, because she didn't have much business. And the next item next to it is a loom that came out of the Babe Ruth house. Sadly, has nothing to do with Babe Ruth. Belonged to Mrs. Gavin's, the owner of the Babe Ruth house. Her mother, it came from Rhode Island, but it's turns out to be a different type of attic loom than you normally have because of the sets of weights that are on it. But things can just gather dust that are in a collection until you make them visible and alive by showing how they were used or talking about the people that had them. We've collected many things here since I asked the selectmen in 1999 for the permission to use this abandoned second floor because it wasn't handicap accessible, and after the library had been here a year and a half while they were redoing the Goodnow Library building, they allowed us to use this space, and it was really, it made the difference of having the society stay alive and become alive and grow, even though it's not handicap accessible right now.
Very good. Thank you.